Hello, everyone. You might believe you're being patient. You might tell yourself you're being understanding, mature, and emotionally composed. Staying calm, avoiding conflict, and letting certain things slide can feel like strength. It can feel like you're taking the high road. But what if that's exactly the reason she's beginning to lose respect for you? From her perspective, every time you tolerate behavior that crosses your boundaries, it doesn't signal strength, it signals a lowering of standards. And once she senses that your standards don't come with consequences, something subtle but powerful begins to shift. She stops adapting to you, and instead, you begin adapting to her. That's the moment the dynamic changes, and often, that's where control is lost. Most men aren't even aware they're doing this. This isn't about controlling women. It's about controlling what you allow into your life. Because in reality, respect and attraction are not built on what you say, they are built on what you consistently tolerate. You can communicate your standards clearly. You can say, "I don't like that." You can even genuinely believe you deserve better. But if your actions don't align with your words, none of that holds weight. People don't listen to what you say nearly as much as they observe what you accept. Every relationship has moments where boundaries are tested. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes unconscious, a dismissive remark, a canceled plan, a lack of consideration. Individually, these moments may seem small or harmless, but they're not insignificant, they are signals. And she's paying attention to how you respond not just once, but repeatedly. Over time, patterns form. If you continuously let things slide, if you address issues but change nothing about your behavior, the message becomes clear. This behavior is acceptable. Not because you said so, but because you demonstrated it through your actions. This aligns with basic behavioral psychology. Actions that face no consequences tend to repeat. Reinforcement doesn't always require a reward. Sometimes the absence of correction is enough. When a boundary is crossed and nothing changes, that boundary doesn't just weaken, it disappears. And this is where it becomes uncomfortable. Respect is closely tied to perceived strength of character. When you protect your standards, you demonstrate self-respect, and that naturally invites respect from others. But when you repeatedly tolerate behavior that undermines you, you send a different signal: hesitation, insecurity, or even fear of loss. Whether she consciously realizes it or not, she responds to that signal. The dynamic shifts slowly, almost invisibly, but once it shifts, it's very difficult to reverse. Because once someone learns your standards carry no real weight, they stop taking them seriously. Standards without enforcement are merely suggestions. And suggestions don't command respect, they invite negotiation, testing, and eventually disregard. At a fundamental level, you are always teaching people how to treat you not through what you demand, but through what you allow. It often begins in a way that feels completely normal. You initiate conversations. You plan dates. You make time, check in, and keep things moving forward. At first, it feels right, you're interested, invested, and putting in effort. But gradually, something shifts. She stops initiating as much. She responds, but rarely reaches out first. She shows up, but doesn't contribute equally. And instead of pulling back, you lean in harder, you text more. You plan more. You give more because you believe that's what a good man does. But here's what most men fail to see. When effort flows in only one direction, it doesn't increase your value, it makes your effort predictable. And predictability reduces emotional tension. Attraction is not built on certainty alone. It exists in the balance between interest and uncertainty, between giving and receiving. When your presence becomes guaranteed, when she knows you will always be there regardless of her effort, it stops feeling valuable and starts feeling expected. And anything that feels guaranteed tends to lose its perceived value. This principle exists everywhere. Scarcity creates value, and effort creates meaning. When something is always available regardless of how little is given in return, it loses its edge. What started as genuine interest slowly becomes a one-sided dynamic. Without realizing it, You shift from being someone she's excited about to someone she simply expects. From someone she invests in to someone who provides. And once that shift happens, respect begins to erode not because she intends to use you, but because she's adapting to the structure you created. You taught her that your attention doesn't need to be earned, so she stopped trying to earn it. Men with strong self-value understand this early. They don't confuse generosity with overinvestment. They don't reward low effort with even more effort. When they notice a lack of reciprocity, they don't double down, they pause, they create space. They step back just enough to observe whether the other person steps forward. If she doesn't, they don't chase. They reassess. Because they understand something most people ignore. Effort only has value when it is mutual. The more you give without receiving, the less your giving actually means. Many men claim to have boundaries. Very few actually enforce them. A boundary is not something you say, it's something you act on. You can say you dislike last-minute cancellations. You can express frustration when your time isn't respected. But if she cancels and you continue to accommodate her without change, then that wasn't a boundary, it was merely a preference. And preferences carry no consequences, which means they carry no weight. Over time, each ignored violation shifts the line further. What once felt unacceptable slowly becomes normal. Eventually, you may look at the relationship and feel like you've lost control. But the uncomfortable truth is, you didn't lose control, you gave it away piece by piece. Every time you chose comfort over clarity. Every time you avoided confrontation instead of reinforcing your standards. Behavior that isn't corrected becomes normalized. And once something is normalized, it is no longer questioned. High-value individuals don't need to be aggressive to enforce boundaries. They are calm, direct, and clear. When a line is crossed, they address it once and then they observe. If the behavior changes, they continue. If it doesn't, they adjust their level of investment. They don't reward inconsistency. They don't ignore patterns. And they don't stay in situations that repeatedly violate their standards, because real boundaries come with a cost. Without consequences, there are no boundaries, and without boundaries, there is no leverage. Pay attention not just to what she says, but how she says it. Disrespect rarely appears as something dramatic at first. It shows up in small ways: sarcasm, dismissive tones, subtle interruptions, jokes at your expense. Individually, they may seem minor, but together, they reveal how she perceives you. Communication is not just about words, it's about positioning. When someone begins speaking to you with less respect, it reflects a shift in how they see you. And ignoring it doesn't make you mature, it gives silent permission for it to continue. Silence is not neutrality. Silence is approval. Over time, these small, unaddressed behaviors accumulate. What once felt like mutual respect begins to feel imbalanced. What once felt like partnership begins to feel hierarchical. And in that hierarchy, you are no longer on equal ground. At a deeper level, the issue is not about her behavior, it's about your response to it. The same patterns, low effort, inconsistency, boundary testing appear in many relationships. The difference lies in what you tolerate. People with strong self-respect don't try to control others. They control their standards and, more importantly, they act in alignment with them. They don't chase inconsistency. They don't over-invest to fix imbalance. They observe first, then decide based on clarity, not emotion. If consistency is present, they invest. If not, they step back without drama, without needing to prove anything. Because they understand that their time, attention, and presence are valuable, and value must be exchanged, not given away freely. When you stop reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally, everything changes. You stop trying to earn approval and instead begin evaluating whether someone meets your standards. That shift alone restores balance. Because self-respect is not something you demand, it's something you demonstrate. And once you truly embody that, people begin to treat you differently, not because you ask them to, but because your behavior no longer allows anything less. Underscore, respect is not something that disappears overnight. It fades gradually, through patterns that are tolerated again and again. Every ignored red flag, every unaddressed behavior, every moment you chose comfort over clarity, it all adds up. At some point, the dynamic shifts. Not because she suddenly changed, but because you showed her what was acceptable. And that's the truth many people avoid. It's easier to blame someone else's behavior than to examine your response to it. But the moment you take responsibility for what you allow is the moment you take your power back. Because now the control is no longer external, it's in your standards, your decisions, and your willingness to walk away from anything that doesn't align with how you expect to be treated. You don't get the respect you think you deserve. You get the respect you tolerate.